All right, everybody. I believe we are live. Oh, I got to get my air quotes in there. Thank you for tuning in. This is Excited Utterance, which is a Chicago-based reading series that is, just about 10 years old, although for a number of those years we have not been functional, in part because of, I guess COVID would be one of the excuses. And then early on for our in-person version of this, our venue closed, and I was investigating finding a new place for us, and then again, COVID and so on and so forth. But one thing that the pandemic really helped me to realize is that, doing things remotely has become a lot more commonplace, and it's a way for me to invite people that, while the show is set in Chicago, this gives me a chance to really reach out and invite readers who are not necessarily passing through town, because lo and behold, we can just do it live on the internet, and I can have some people from all over read. Speaking of that, I am so thrilled tonight to have for our, I don't know if it's a reboot, I've called it a couple of different things, our first show back, these two writers joining me. And in the order they are on the screen: Jim Daniels, fellow Michigander, fellow glasses wearer. It's an all specs night from what I can see, and I feel really good about that. I've long admired Jim's poetry, but he's a man of all stripes, and he will tell you all about his current novel. It's a novel, right, Jim?
Short stories.
Short stories. Okay. But he'll tell you all about that in just a moment. And to his right, to his left, actually, my right, is Rachel Swearingen. Hey, Rachel, Chicago-based writer. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let me briefly explain the format for this show. It is us three reading tonight. It's a round robin format, which means that everybody tonight will have three opportunities. The way it's structured here, it's three chances to read from their oeuvre. I love to use my oeuvre word when I can. It will go in the order that you see on the screen. I'm going to start. Jim will follow. Rachel will follow, and then it'll come around again, and then one last pass in that same order. And I think that's all that the audience really needs to know. I'm just really pleased to have these two writers joining me tonight. And I think we're good to go. And it's probably the best thing to do. Do either of you have anything to say, even though you've casually muted yourselves, before I send you down to the green room where I've put out some copious snacks for you? No, you're both good? All right. Well, you're both muted, so I think I take that as a sign. I'm not going to take it personally, but so I will get this started. Jim, I will see you shortly. We will all see you shortly. So I'm going to send you down, and there's some lovely croutons down there. You need to check those out. And Rachel, same thing. Get to the croutons before Jim does, and we'll see you shortly. All right. Okay. So hello. Glad to be here. I am opening this crazy thing tonight, and I'm going to start. I'm doing more or less a chronological series of sets here, and starting with the older and moving to the newer stuff. And I'm going to read from my most recent full length that's been published, which is this book here, Activities of Daily Living from Salmon Poetry. And I'm going to read 4 things from it to start for my first set. The first one is called Confessional. Sometimes I pee in your bathroom. I turn on the faucets and the rushing water helps me get done fast. I like the sound of your toilet flushing. My own is nothing to write home about. In fact, it's kind of slow and draggy. I asked the landlord to fix it, but he has bigger fish to fry. I always pay my rent on time, but no. Your door was open. It's a secure building, but I double lock mine. You can't be too careful. Once I stepped into your tub. Those colorful sea life decals really made my day. I took off my shoes first. I wished I could have taken a bath then and there, but I got scared. I jumped out and grabbed my shoes, and when I saw my reflection in the mirror, I was as white as a ghost. I won't do that again. Your soap smells nice. That's bad. I'm laughing at my own poem there. So I live in a high-rise building, and this was inspired by a poem was inspired by a neighbor that used to have that would always leave his door ajar. I mean, he kind of like jammed something in there to leave it so he could go down to the lobby to get his mail or whatever. And I just thought, I mean, we are very friendly here, but that just doesn't seem like a good idea. And so thus Confessional was born. A contestant. Obliged to clap when the applause sign is lit, her smile beams candid charisma to throngs. Wriggling through a transparent oblong box teeming with earthworms, then catapulted into a cramped reservoir of molasses, she stands, panting, quivering hand hovering above the buzzer, while the genial host makes chit-chat and jokes at her expense. She comes in third. This is Toothpaste, the poem, not the actual item. When I see that toothpaste tube, deflated, flattened, I'm a little sad because I remember how it used to be. Firm and plump in the prime of its anti-cavity youth, fluoridated, minty tasting, emerging timidly from its glossy wrapper, sheeny under bathroom lights, like the silver bumper of a new car parked conspicuously in the dealership's lot, tantalizing prospective buyers browsing in the midday sun. And I remember before even that how it slipped free from its rectangular prison post-liberation from the oral care aisle at the grocery, where it sat shelved between mountains of mouthwash and forests of floss. I had to squat down to seize it, inauspicious packaging designed to be attractive but not too gaudy, like the teeth it was destined to clean. Whitened, but not so white when I opened my mouth to smile or speak, people would squint as if blinded by the light. So, as I was telling my esteemed co-readers here, it's been a while since I've given any kind of a longer reading, even though this is these 3 different passes, so like little micro readings. So I sat down and I was going through material today, and you start to see patterns in work over time that you don't even realize. So I got a thing about grocery stores and pharmacies, and toothpaste has appeared in other poems as well, though it hasn't necessarily been front and center like this. And it's interesting. This is for sure a Walgreens poem, actually, when I think about it, because that whole image about the way everything was shelved, and it takes me back to this Walgreens I used to go to. So it's just interesting to be reacquainted with these things and to see what kind of drives us. We don't always know, what's behind the things that obsess us when we write. So I have one more from here for my first pass. Again, I think I've timed my set out pretty well. And then we'll bring Jim in. And this is a poem I used to read quite a lot after I had first written it. And then, I'm a musician as well. And so same kind of thing, the newest thing that you're working on is usually the thing you want to perform or read or what have you. And then you go through periods where you'll read certain things or play certain things a lot, and then you kind of put them away. So I looked at this today and I was like, oh, yeah, I got to read that. And this, I used to commute to work. Chicago's got its L, and I live in Uptown, and from where I can look right now, I can actually see part of the L tracks a little off in the distance. And I have not been a regular L taker for a while now, but this was totally inspired by riding the Brown line in this particular place coming into downtown, where it would turn, and the train would always seem to stop at this one spot. And it was this McDonald's and this room that was above it. And that's what inspired this. So secret room above McDonald's, which I think requires another drink here so that I'm I'm ready for it. Secret room above McDonald's. Trains pass by, heads swivel, peering inside. Sparking off tracks illuminates briefly its vacancy. Ronald ascends stairs, slowly, breathing labored. His floppy feet maneuver each step with difficulty. In one gloved fist, a rattan whip, souvenir from Vietnam, unconfiscated at customs. Each finger sweats encased in silken threads. Ronald's heart booms a succession of bomb blasts. The stairwell, hidden behind a panel behind the deep fryer, is dark. He flicks a switch disguised as a circuit breaker. Not even the manager is aware of its true purpose. 1 minute he's there, the next, gone. The whip is torqued like a baguette with sisal stripes. It whistles, swishing through the air left to right, then right to left. Nudging a creaky door with his replaced kneecap, Ronald winces, feeling phantom prickles from shrapnel still shored in his thigh. Light strobes from departing trains. Scraps of paper litter the room's floor. He remains in the shadows, patiently catches his breath. Perspiration streaks pancake makeup, drops of sweat pausing on the underside of his round, red nose. He scratches a shock of hair with the whip's butt. Static electricity crackles in the air. In the far corner, out of sight, a chair, movement, muffled sounds. The customer's stomach gurgles, greedily digesting a Big Mac. Fear animates muscles restrained by straps. After hours of struggling, he still can't get any looser. A large wax cup of spilled Coke blotches black on gray industrial carpeting. Below, cash registers rapidly ring up fast food purchases. The gag in his mouth is thick and wet. The customer identifies a clown materializing out of the darkness and feels suddenly afraid. The customer is always right. Thank you very much. I will now bring in Jim Daniels. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Larry.
How are you feeling? Are you ready to rock the house?
Oh, well, I was just getting comfortable listening to you read, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing with like round robin anything, it's like in the musical realm, I had over the years only one person who ever like didn't like the format, and because he would just start to get into like feeling it, and then he'd be like done, and then the next time he'd just start to get it, and then he'd be done. Whereas I welcome these like times to like sit back and take a big breath.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you ready to go?
Sure.
All right. I like that spirit. So I'm looking forward to it. I will shut up and looking forward to hearing you, my man.
Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, thanks to Larry for inviting me on, and I'm really pleased to be reading with Larry and Rachel, two writers who I really admire. So my new book, I'll hold up the cover, called The Luck of the Fall, because I like the cover, actually. I'm going to read the title story, and it's going to spill over into the second segment. And then I'll read some poems after that. So the story is called The Luck of the Fall, and you really don't need to know much about it, except it's set in a working class neighborhood on the edge of Detroit. October's streetlight had not yet thrown its damp blanket chill over us on Pearl Street, but it had given notice, a cold in the back of our throats that signaled change. On our drab street of tracked 3-bedroom ranches surrounding the Ford plant on 8 Mile Road, a single tree had been planted uniformly in the middle of each tiny ragged lawn. A series of dotted I's down the street, maple, oak, had yet to fill out, and in fact, many had already died and not been replaced, as if the dots had been an unnecessary frill of punctuation. As dusk fell, the changing leaves resembled small campfires until darkness snuffed them out entirely. When our fathers weren't working overtime, we all ate at 5:30. If someone had a dinner bell, they could have safely ring it at that hour and bring all the children in the neighborhood home to wash our hands and say grace and wolf down whatever pale meat or overcooked spaghetti or other dried then boxed or frozen then thawed or canned substance fried or boiled and heat it up in a saucepan. We were proud of our uniform blandness. We leaned into it for comfort. The only fish we ate had been bullied into squares, breaded and frozen, so we never connected what swam to what we consumed. Even during Lent, when we abstained from meat and tackled fish and chips on Fridays from the KFC in their squeaky styrofoam containers, the fish was disguised by the Rorschach test shapes of thick breading. My friend Kathy's dog Fish Stick bit me on the ring finger of my left hand, leaving a scar below the knuckle, as a warning to never get married or maybe just never reach too quickly for anything, to wait my turn and take what was given without expectation. Sorry to be slow setting the table for what I have to say. If you looked out our front window, you could see Paula and Kathy, both 11, a year younger than me, sprawled in the slightly damp grass, cool to the touch, practicing cheers on Paula's front lawn in the after dinner in between. They lived 3 doors down from each other, careless laughter and imprecise cartwheels. They'd never be cheerleaders. We probably all knew that. They'd both get pregnant in high school. None of us imagined that. I was a young idiot boy who had known them from birth and couldn't handle the shade their pregnancies threw on our street, since our trees offered none. It stung me hard and deep like a long breath of that new chill air. The Ford plant was the gold mine that turned our fathers into worker ants on the anthill and our mothers into worker ants in the neighborhood. We lived in a company town without a town, the frontier of the Ford plant, the great prairie, and we were all prairie dogs. Oh, forget it. I'm lost on my way across the street to cheer the cheerleaders. They know all the routines by heart, despite their lack of pom-poms, uniforms, and the untouchable cuteness of the official cheerleaders who cheered on the official football players under the lurid glare of the lights on the 8-mile-high football field that we could see from our sidewalk, hulking over the low shoulders of our tiny houses. The neighborhood guys played tackle football without pads in the swampy field on the edge of the woods next to Schofield Elementary on weekend afternoons. In the street, we played two-hand touch, two-hand shove, everything and nothing out of bounds. We beat on each other out of reckless affection or subconscious preparation for our futures on the assembly line. Our favorite game was free-for-all, where we jumped on each other, falling into a ragged pile, randomly fighting until someone got hurt. Fun, we called it, unleashing our pent-up whatever on the anonymous street of identical houses. We'd never play for the school team. That required anonymous haircuts and sincerity. That required faith in their scoreboard. Our families had one car, and those cars were driven daily on the giant sea of asphalt called 8 Mile Road, gashed by yellow lines so everyone knew their places, where to dock their dinghies. Despite our inability to circle our station wagons, we turned inward with unspoken love and outward with spoken defiance. On our block, we did not judge. Those girls were unlucky. Tough luck, we said softly as their bellies rounded, our heads tilting toward them, since we never said, I love you aloud to anyone. We wanted to gently touch those bellies, but we were shy and afraid and maybe superstitious about that luck. None of the school cheerleaders got pregnant. I think their advisor, Mrs. Fountain, provided them with more useful advice and perhaps even some concrete forms of protection. Or perhaps they were not even, no, they had to be. We never found a 4-leaf clover in our weedy lawns that included plenty of clover. We all knew the stupid trick of squeezing 2 stems together so it looked like 4 leaves, and we could not stop ourselves from doing it. or from rubbing dandelions on our necks to see if we like butter or we're in love or both. I learned later that it was supposed to be buttercups, a kind of flower. All I know is that if you rub dandelions hard enough, they can turn anything yellow. We kissed that evening, the three of us, careless as those cartwheels on that ragged grass beginning its brown journey uncut since Labor Day. They took turns kissing me and laughing, sprawling away onto their backs, then leaning in again. Our cold noses and fingers touched. Jazzed by proximity and darkness, we bristled in our thin fall jackets. By newfound strength and range of motion, by curious tingling, the static electricity of the startling awareness of opposites, cold noses, warm cheeks. Hey, what are you guys doing? I asked. Cheers, what do you think? Yeah, I nodded. I was no wise guy with words. How we got to kissing, I'm still not sure. I plopped down on the grass and they plopped down too, as if we were slipping beneath some invisible wire, escaping unsnagged. I could hear Fish Stick barking at the fence 3 doors down. Fish Stick's lonely, Kathy said. You shouldn't be biting people then, Paula said, and she grabbed my hand where it pushed into the grass. I lost my balance and fell flat on my back. Let's see that finger, Paula said. The scab was hardening and narrowing into what would be its permanent scar. I'll kiss your boo-boo, she said. No, I'll kiss your boo-boo. It's my dog, Kathy said, and they laughed and fell, wrestling on top of me, twisting my arm around so we got all tangled and touching. And then we stopped and breathed heavily enough to warm each other's faces. And that might have been enough for any other cool October evening in our back catalog, but it wasn't enough on this night. Sweet clover breath caressed my face as we lay stunned and chilled, magnifying the double ditches of our young hearts. Who kissed who first didn't matter once we started. Soon they were swiveling my head back and forth to alternate kissing my chapped lips, each of them trying to outdo the other in duration and exaggerated smacking that soon faded into something quieter, more serious. Me, I did no smacking at all. Paula was pale blonde and thin. Her long hair flew as we rolled laughing and kissing over the grass, hair falling into the open mouth of laughter, fierce eyes exposed as she brushed it away to kiss me again. Paula's nose was always red and running. Her eyes developed serious dark circles under them, like judgmental ashes after she got pregnant. The rest of her seemed to shrink as her belly swelled. A few months in, she disappeared entirely. When she showed up again, it was without the baby. She never finished high school. The last time I saw her was in a drugstore, the kind we both came to haunt in later days. I'd like to stop with us staring at each other in the light of the bare bulb lamp on the naked floor of that abandoned house that had been repurposed for drugs in its abandonment. But it'd make the ending predictable, easy. I can't describe my eyes then, but hers, recognition, but no affect. It was like, oh, you too. Our old neighborhood had turned into a shooting game at the bowling alley where we hung out during our early teens. One of those old Western shoot 'em ups, ping, ping. The goal, shoot all the bad guys in the allotted time. If you accomplished that, you had extra time to shoot more bad guys. The faceless bad guys closed the Ford plant. We could not shoot them, so we shot each other until houses were abandoned by our parents or by us, depending on who was still alive and had their wits about them. And that's where I will stop this first section. Rachel?
Wow, that was beautiful, Jim. I can't wait to hear the rest of that. It's such a delight to read with you and with Larry tonight. So I'm going to read a story as well, and I'm also going to be doing this in 2 parts. It's called Clown School. It's a fairly recent story, and I'll just start. The first time he touched me, I thought it was an accident. I was on the L on my way to clown school, sitting near the back of the car. The train was crowded, the mid-August air stagnant and heady, the view of the city so familiar I didn't see it anymore. In my bag was my clown gear: 2 red noses, grease paint, a curly rainbow wig, a pair of size 16 wingtips, gloves, and a horn. That morning, my daughter had convinced me to squeeze into her lucky red jumpsuit. Clown school had been her idea. I'd been forcing myself to attend for 8 long, humiliating weeks. Rooftops whirred past, and I had to go to the bathroom and worried about wriggling out of the jumpsuit in the tiny restroom at school. It was tight around my middle after too much eating to quiet the ache of my recent divorce. When the hand reached into the gap between my seat and the wall, I inched away, thinking the person behind me had inadvertently grazed me. But it must have been the red that lured him like a flame. When he reached a second time, his hand slithering along my hip and under my ass, I jolted and turned. Behind me, a man cradled his backpack in his lap. He wore sunglasses and was so expressionless. I turned back around, the blood rushing to my face. I considered moving to another part of the train, but I was immobilized. A few minutes later, his hand reappeared and inched upwards. This time I shot up and whipped around as the train lurched to a stop. The man glanced up and then away, as if I were one of those unstable passengers it was best to ignore. It had been years since I'd been harassed, let alone groped, but memories of all the times I'd been accosted flashed before me. The first when I was 8 and walking home from the park at dusk, a teenager pushed me onto a lawn. "You know what I want," he growled, the crickets chirping, the lit houses impermeable. "I'll scream bloody murder," I said, and he said, "Go right ahead, no one will hear." When I did, my shriek was so ear-piercing, the boy took off. But on that train that evening, as I said, it had been a long time since anything like that had happened. In that moment, I lost the invisibility older women warned me about. And with that loss came a fracturing, an interruption in the force field, a splintering of time. The man hadn't hurt me, merely copped a feel, as we used to say, but my daughter would have shouted if it had happened to her. She would have alerted the conductor or incited the other passengers to throw him off the train. She would have been incredulous if I told her I'd done nothing at all. The car was less crowded now. I stood in the aisle, holding onto the edge of my seat as a smirk rose to the man's lips. At Armitage, he pushed past me to get off the train. I blamed my ex for what I did next. When we divorced, he confessed he'd been wanting to leave for years, that a future with me felt like oncoming death. I followed the man as he hurried down the stairs and through the turnstile, under the tracks and down the sidewalk, past shops and into a neighborhood of tightly spaced 2 and 3 flats. I clipped after him, and he picked up his pace. How casual he tried to appear, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He glanced back once quickly and clutched his keys in a lowered hand, a trick I knew well. I could sense him checking peripherally for others who might come to his aid. He was frightened of me. I would miss my performance, a final exam that, if passed, led to the next course in the program, embracing your inner loser. And maybe that was the reason I was following him, to give myself an out. I thought clown school would be easy because we wouldn't have to speak, but it was terrifying. The instructor encouraging one moment, mimicking and provoking the next. We were to let our bodies communicate our most authentic, vulnerable selves, whatever that meant. At the end of the second class, the teacher had leaned into my belly and shouted, "Hey, nice lady, get the hell out of town." And in every class thereafter, he zeroed in on me, jeering, barking, making me do bizarre things. The groper rushed toward a 2-flat behind a wrought iron fence decked out with pink balloons. He fumbled with his keys, trying to unlock the gate. "What do you want?" he said as I approached. "Get away from me." "You grabbed me," I said, and my voice shook. "You're crazy." He tried another key, and the lock released, and he slipped inside. Then 2 little girls in party dresses and a boy in a Spider-Man costume came running through the gangway, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy." I pushed through the gate before he could relock it. "Nice to see you again," he said to me in an exaggerated, cheerful way as he blocked my path. "You need anything else, you let me know." "Is she coming to my party?" the older girl said. "Are you inviting me?" I asked. She nodded. "Everybody can come." "Well, thank you," I said. "I'd love to meet your mother." "Mom," she shouted. "Go now," the man said under his breath. How anxious he looked as I followed his kids around the side of the building into a backyard, its fence strung with streamers and more balloons, a unicorn piñata hanging from a tree. His wife approached from the deck in a sundress, her hair in a messy bun on top of her head. Well, hello, she said, extending her hand. I'm Stephanie, Kevin's wife. I hesitated too long, and the man I now knew as Kevin said, she's still a little shook up. Some asshole grabbed her on the train. I told her to walk out with me. I blinked, stunned, but also a little impressed. Oh, you poor dear, his wife said, putting her hand on my shoulder. I'm so glad Kevin was there for you. Do you need a drink? I've got wine, margaritas. I make a mean virgin, too. She has to get back, Kevin said too quickly. Actually, I'd love a margarita, I said, regaining my composure. It was really awful. The man must do it all the time, probably low self-esteem and tiny. Their youngest daughter clung to her mother's leg, listening. Doodad syndrome, I said. Stephanie's horsey laughter made me almost regret coming. She had no idea who her husband was. Why ruin her happiness, even if it was false? Wouldn't I have given anything in that moment to return to the ignorance of my former life? What did the man do? The little girl asked. Go play, Kevin said. He opened his backpack and handed Stephanie some napkins and plastic cups. You forgot the ice cream, Stephanie said. Kevin glanced at me, then said, I'm not going back. Just run up to the corner, please. He didn't want to leave me alone with her. We've got cake, he said. The kids are going to be up all night as it is. It's just not a birthday without cake and ice cream, is it? I said. Exactly. Kevin, please. Okay, he said. And to me, come on, I'll walk you out. Kevin, no, Stephanie said. I'm getting her a drink. She patted my arm. Stay, please. We've got plenty of food and you'll love the neighbors. Kevin and I watched her walk back to the deck where several other adults sat around a long umbrella table. They'll never believe you, he said. You better be gone by the time I get back. And then I'll stop here. Take it away, Larry.
Thank you for alerting me. I didn't want to cut into that at all. But, I just want to make it known to anybody out there. There was no commiserating here with the clown theme. Am I correct? You can.
That's right. Or the L theme.
Yeah. Or the L theme. Right. And then you mentioned the unicorn. And that was another poem I was going to read. So I think you handled the unicorn better. So I will pick up from here. Rachel, that was really great. Looking forward to hearing how that turns out. Love it. And my turns out there had nothing to do with the quality of it. It's just clown school. What a great and oh, don't even get me started. I've known clowns. So, okay. So great, wonderful from Jim and Rachel for that first round. For this one, I'm going to read from it's a manuscript, but it's a forthcoming full length that my publisher, again, Salmon Poetry, and then the first book I did with them, which Jim blurbed. Thank you so much. And this one was supposed to come out in early 2020, and again, guess what happened then? So. It's everything it's a small publisher based in Ireland, and everything that they had committed to publishing is they've been slowly putting out. And so this is all poems that will appear in my next full length with them from a book called Frequently Asked Questions. And the first is Spoiler Alerts. Jesus dies. Then he makes a comeback, which is another surprise, even to the apostles, some of whom had heard all about it, but shrugged it off as the water into wine talking, conveniently forgetting that earlier miracle, even as he was arisen and strolled back in all like, what's up? An uncontrollable silence filled the nave. A duck's quack doesn't echo. Thus, when Daisy and Daffy vacationed at the Grand Canyon and booked a mule ride to the Phantom Ranch below, despite having ample opportunity to test reverberative qualities of canyon walls along the route down into the gorge, their efforts failed to produce any demonstrably plangent, drawn-out hellos bellowed again and again and again by diligent bills. It was all a dream. Hitler never declared war. Hitler never existed. So today, it's not at all uncommon to have a best bud Hitler or to eat at Hitler's, wear a dress designed by Hitler, drive a Hitler, root for Hitler to win an Oscar, open your mouth and say, ah, for Dr. Hitler, listen to smooth jazz queued up by DJ Hitler, marry into the Hitlers, name a newly discovered star or pound puppy something Hitler, regret being mean in high school to that quiet Hitler kid who went on to something big. Nothing rhymes with orange. Keats tried eating one a day, and that didn't help. Shakespeare often wore an orange tunic, which proved to be quite unfashionable and a real turnoff to his patrons, especially the third Duke of Pembroke. Dickinson carried clementines around in the pockets of her famous dress, sticky orange juice gumming pocketed poetic fragments. The butler did it. This is country singer posts a selfie from vacation. Beyond them lyrics, committee writ cornpone quips, quick drawn out a 10-gallon hat. Long as you include all the buzzwords, who's really listening anyway? There is that self to sell and soul, the whole picture merchandised for digital consumption, a shotgun marriage of gumption and gifts, downloaded and devoured like barbecue ribs, finger licking, ear smacking, eye cracking, artfully askew as if surreptitiously snapped on the fly, dawdling along the Playa del Amor with a Gibson and a beer. So I know there's probably somebody out there saying it's GIF, not GIF, but gumption and GIF sound so good. And I'll go to the mat and say it can be GIF or GIF. And for that poem, it's GIF. Green screen. Before the green screen, I stopped, menaced by roaring triceratops, elbow to elbow with Napoleon at Waterloo, and flanked by a retinue of Busby Berkeley bathing beauties. What's not to enjoy? Alone but not lonely, the monitor nearby, a window to another megacosm of many megacosms stitched together and computer generated, I kept my eyes affixed on Bonaparte's bayonet, spearing the rearing dinosaur as bikinied ladies clapped. We're cooking. Bridge may be icy. I think maybe you can tell a lot of these. I write a lot starting from titles. I write, approach it a couple different ways, but I'm looking at all these and it's taking me back. Bridge may be icy. Bridge may be icy or not. Its reputation for iciness is renowned, but don't get your hopes up if you're an ice aficionado and its slipperiness is nil. I know some guys. We could buy out all the bagged ice at 7-Eleven and dump it on the crest of the bridge if that makes you happy. But if you're addicted to ice, instead, me and the same guys will convene an intervention, calling in friends and family to help wean you off of the harder stuff. Icicles, hail, icebergs. The Titanic sinkers and skate pond tricksters looking oh so smooth, safe, or weight-bearing to those unschooled in the ways of the 15 known solid phases of water. Relative. Pausing here for a second. Multitasking. Do we really need another Liam, Noah, or Mason? Emma, Charlotte, or Harper? I could go on. If I've insulted any of you by calling your handle into question, it was not my intention. Chances are, unless you're on the lam or in witness protection, the name you bear is the byproduct of one particular parent or both. Though the likelihood of one superseding the other is damn high, either begetter wore the other one down, using sentiment for a dead relative one or more generations removed, wielding it the way a bad seed from far down the family tree once swung a cumbersome club, crushing the skull of a marauding berserker whose name today more or less translates as the common Bob. Okay, I think I've got one more here. Not laughing in amusement at my own work, but kind of laughing at, where am I here? Okay, so one more. All day protection. My deodorant boasts all day protection, but it can't halt a bullet, take my side in any ireful arguments, or commute a parachute if I'm forced to skydive from a defective plane. At that point, sweaty armpits would be the least of my concerns, though it might also be the singular occasion wet-stained underarms on a lemon yellow shirt against a backdrop of sky blue sky prove aesthetically pleasing for most of the plunge, from cruising altitude to terrestrial death. All right, let me bring in Jim. Oh, you're muted.
Great. Thanks, Larry.
Of course. Let me give you the floor. Are you ready to go for part
Yep.
2 from your new book? All right, great. All right,
Okay.
I'll see you again next time around.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a quick, here's my clown, the cover of a book. I got a story in it about a clown that I'll have to share with Rachel at some point. So hers is wonderful. So just to bring you up to date, or to remind you, 3 kids laying on the grass outside this house in the evening. Okay. Kathy's older brother Kevin was my friend, so I hung out at their house. Fish Stick never liked me, but he loved Kevin, despite us looking alike. Some kids at school even called us brothers. Kathy's long blonde hair turned up at the ends bounced when she walked. An enthusiastic walker, she sprung up from the sidewalk with each step. Her cartwheels were spectacular in their sprawl. When she started shuffling down the street with the weight of her sin, it was all the sadder. We learned as we got into more advanced math that many of our parents had married due to unplanned pregnancies. Holy Helen, the outlier as the mother of only one child, lived at the end of the block, but no one paid her wagging finger much attention. She was like a commandment we forgot to memorize. We all went to the same church and listened to the same sermons, just Sunday background noise for our lives. One more thing we had to put up with. When it came to getting married or buried, we called up the church and they took care of things in exchange for cash money. We on Pearl Street rarely got to decide when to stop anything. Money and power give you more control over stopping. The free-for-alls always stopped when someone got hurt. That might have been a pretty good place to at least pause a while longer. 2 pretty girls kissing me without consequence on a clear night in October as the sky went dark blue to black. A few rare stars may have even been visible, though if so, we weren't paying them any mind. The gray fuzz of our polluted skies mirroring our concrete streets provided some comfort and insulation against the deeper plunge of lost possibilities. Maybe we should have looked up a little more often. I don't want to be a cheerleader, Paula said. Nobody said you did, Kathy said. How come they don't have guy cheerleaders, I asked, just to contribute as we worked to fill the odd silence of not knowing what to do next. Some schools do, Kathy said, like colleges. So it's what you got, Paula said, and they both snorted. I laughed too. I had nothing to show. Kathy reached over the cool, damp grass that we'd matted down with our wrestling. She grabbed my hand and squeezed, so I reached over and grabbed Paula's hand and squeezed. On her front lawn, behind the thin pine tree that had done so well that someone would cut it down and steal it at Christmas that year, a lesson in that we'd learn over and over. Anything nice will disappear. I feel the earth spinning, I said, through the ground, real slow. That's because we're such good kissers, Kathy said. I lay there, my skin suddenly prickly, trying to think of something clever, but my mouth was dry, and I felt something weird in my chest, so I just swallowed and held on tight. And I believe if I time this relatively well, that's the end of the story. I have time for a poem. And this one's for Larry. I know is a musician. And this is called Tying My Shoe at the New Pornographers Concert, Mr. Small's Theater, Pittsburgh. We have a lot of old churches, and this one is turned into a concert hall. We stood on the deconsecrated concrete floor of the old church turned nightclub and got our ears blasted while I searched for someone my age. Bald guy up front? Maybe. My wife and I, too late to get a seat in the choir loft, stood below with eager boppers and swears through an hour of Jail, the warm-up band. Yes, capital J, Jail. Below zero outside, we waited to get wristbanded like endangered birds to be tagged and released. Have ID available. No exceptions. I had not had a drink since, well, I didn't bother pulling mine out. Something crude about that phrase. I'm 59 going on whatever's next. She made no exceptions despite my protest. I won't be at the bar. She nearly ruffled my white hair like a team mascot for the cemetery. I couldn't quite follow Jail's between-song patter about video games. I'm losing my hearing. Is that easier for concerts or harder? Jail finished. My wife and I didn't talk about this afterwards, but I'm telling you. I bent down to tie my shoe halfway through the new pornographers. Sold out crowd, squeezed body to body against the altar stage. I told her I was going down. I leaned a hand against her waist to steady myself. An alarmed young couple beside us expressed concern. My wife shouted quickly, "He's okay, he's just dying. I mean, he's okay, he's just tying his shoe. I mean, he's okay, he just wants to kneel on the floor and whisper a prayer like in the old days." I'll stop there and wait for Land of Rachel's story.
Wow, that was beautiful, Jim. Both the story and the poem. Okay, part 2. I watched Kevin cut through the gangway and hurry to the store. Just an average, regular guy. When had it started, the grabbing and groping? Or was I the first? I still had to go to the bathroom, but like a 3-year-old, I squeezed my legs together and waited for Stephanie to cross the yard. She handed me a margarita saying, "I'm so sorry about what happened to you. Some old guy has been exposing himself to girls in the neighborhood all summer. They finally caught him, but he's probably out already." "Probably," I said. "So how did you two meet? Kevin and me?" She said she was distracted by the children at the back of the yard, slapping the piñata back and forth. "Leave it alone," she said. "Stop touching it. I told you, after the cake." More guests had arrived. Several young women circled together, laughing, trading stories. My stomach swelled against the tight fabric of my jumpsuit. Any minute, Kevin would return with the ice cream. I needed to tell Stephanie now, but my bladder was ready to burst. "Would you mind if I used your bathroom?" I said. "Of course not. There's one down the hall from the kitchen as you go inside," she said. I hurried up the porch and through the sliding glass doors into the kitchen where an older woman busied herself putting food onto trays. She looked a little like Stephanie. She smiled at me, one harmless middle-aged mother to another, and I made my way past her to the bathroom where I double-checked the lock and fought to wrestle myself from my romper. My right arm was now pinned to my side as I squirmed and yanked and finally ripped free. How pathetic I felt, sitting naked on the toilet in the bathroom of the man who had just groped me, my clothes around my ankles. I stood and pulled up the jumpsuit, sucked in my gut, and tried to zip it closed, but the zipper had ripped, so I would have to keep my arm pinned to my side to hide the exposed skin. Before the sink, I washed my hands. I took a sip of the margarita. It was perfect and tart and flecked with lime zest. I opened my bag and took out my lipstick. What was I doing here? I'd never go out and tell Stephanie and all those people. Kevin was probably right. They'd never believe me. For all I knew, he was already back. I had the lipstick in my hand. I could write it on the mirror and then leave through the front of the house, leave my message to fate. Then I had a better idea. I grabbed my drink in my bag and I slipped through the living room and up the stairs looking for Kevin and Stephanie's bedroom. On the hallway walls were family pictures, and in every one, Kevin wore the same slicked-on grin. Stenciled above the photos was the phrase, "The best part of memories is making them." Their room was at the end of the hall, and when I opened the door, a sour scent hit my nose and took me back to the early parenting days of my own marriage, when the bedroom was the most neglected in the house. They had his and hers dressers, one long one with a large mirror, another taller one off to the side, both covered with toiletries. A TV hung above an exercise bike draped with laundry. On the floor were balled up socks, and I imagined Kevin a year from now watching TV in bed alone, his wife with someone new. I set my drink down on the long dresser next to their framed wedding picture and pulled my lipstick from my bag. I was going to write, "Your husband is the groper," on the mirror, but when I leaned in, I glimpsed my mother's weary face transposed over mine, and I could hear her saying, "Leave it be, what's the point?" And then I saw Kevin in the doorway, his mouth agape, his lips twisted with what? Disgust, astonishment, shame? He didn't speak, and it hit me why he had groped me that evening not once, but 3 times. He hadn't chose me. I was just there. I was just sitting in the right seat. In the mirror, my father's face wavered too, and I remembered him goosing my mother as she bent over to wring out the mop, as she carried a basket of laundry up the stairs. "Gary," she'd say, "you stop that." How we chuckled, my siblings and I, how we pinched and goosed each other too. And there was joy in the act, pleasure in the chase. And I remembered that boy again, the one who held me down near the park until I screamed. I understood then why we children reveled in the high-pitched screech, practice for future lechs we would meet. Maybe it was only later on the train back home that I wondered how many times my mother had been clutched or chased or hounded in her life, but something shook loose in me. I leaned into the mirror with my lipstick and rimmed my lips into a lurid red frown. I dumped out my clown gear and powdered my face white, made my eyebrows thick and black. I attached my plastic nose and my rainbow wig. Through all of this, Kevin did not speak or move, not even as I sat on their marital bed and put on my gargantuan shoes, the toes stuffed with newspaper. He was lost, floating, a balloon hovering over his life. We had that much in common. Then Stephanie appeared, her face registering shock and then confusion. "She's a clown? Why is she in our bedroom?" Kevin stammered as I stood like a penguin. I reached for my white gloves and slid them on, a reverse striptease. I hung my horn around my neck and handed my backup nose to Kevin. "Put it on," I said. Though stupefied, he obeyed. "Oh God," Stephanie said, "I can't wait to see this. I'm going down to light the cake." She rushed away, and I picked up one foot and then the next, and Kevin turned and fled down the stairs. My shoes thumped as I descended after him into the living room, through the kitchen and the patio doors. Outside, the guests stopped talking. The children stopped whacking the piñata at the back of the yard. Kevin backed to the edge of the deck in his bulbous red nose. "Look," a mother said to the toddler on her lap. "It's a clown, 2 clowns." Kevin laughed uncomfortably and reached to pull off his nose. I shook my head and wagged a gloved finger. "No, no, no." He let the nose snap back and winced, and the guest howled. What was happening in Kevin, I cannot say, but I was not me, or I was more me than I had ever been before or since. My feet were heavy on the deck as I thumped forward. The breeze entered my torn zipper as I clapped my hands together, as I cocked a hip and batted my eyes. A child started to cry. I was hideous. I was beautiful. I inched toward Kevin, and Kevin reached toward his wife, who protected the cake and pushed him away. He stumbled and fell off the deck backwards, righting himself, stumbling again, as if choreographed. Into the yard, I vaulted after him. I goosed him and honked my horn as he ran. "We are ordinary, Kevin," I telegraphed as I zigzagged, waddled, and chased. "We will die," I transmitted. Kevin lifted his arms to leap over the unlit fire pit, and I flapped my arms in response and sailed over it too. We were running for our lives, my groper and me. All around us, people laughed and shouted. Round and round we went in that fenced yard, the unicorn swinging from the tree, the birthday girl watching with her fist stuffed in her mouth, my horn honking, honking. Thank you. All right, Larry.
That was awesome. That's I don't remember if you said that's new, Rachel. This is a new.
Yeah, it's a new piece.
Oh, wow. It's great. It's great. I can't even begin. So thank you so much. All right. We'll see you in a bit. You don't want me to go down the clown wormhole here. So, all right. I've now I'm in the realm of the newer stuff, and I'm going to do a couple that are brand new, and then actually two from I have the book that's hopefully coming out next year from Salmon, Frequently Asked Questions, and then during the pandemic, I finished another book that I'm shopping around that's called A Cheesecake in the Bunker. And they're poems that are all inspired by this Italian exploitation director named I'm spacing out on his name. Doesn't matter. Italian exploitation director. It'll either come to me or it won't. And this first one is called Boys of the Jukebox. All the titles of the poems in the book are the titles of his films. The Italian Elvis is poorly synced, but the show must go on. Strumming guitar and snapping fingers in a frenzied foray through the basement bar, La Fogna, the sewer. Band outfitted in white, 2 saxes, drums, piano, stand-up bass. Celentano in black sports a bow tie and boogie woogies. Il Moleggiato, the flexible one, parts the crowd of ecstatic dancers in swinging thrall to the economic miracle, superfluous wealth, efficiency, prosperity. As the camera pans, Elkie Summer pouts in gloves above each elbow, her glittery clutch tenderly stroked. I'm so irked that I'm spacing out on this guy's name, but so yeah, he directed films in various genres, and that was one of his rock and roll movies. This one is called Operation San Pietro, and it has a little epigraph at the beginning. Joe Ventura, a gangster, buys the Pieta for $40 and a plate of spaghetti, which I got from the Edmund G. Robinson Encyclopedia, since he was in the movie. Operation San Pietro. I was looking for something to spice up my office. Not much going on in there. A desk, a few books, coat rack. Got to keep up appearances. There's a spot in the corner where I think she'd be good. Mary looks so much bigger than her boy. Michelangelo maybe wanted her sadness to be more huger than proportional. I'm no artist, so I can't say. But her wrinkled gown tumbles off Mary like waves of melting mozzarella pooling at her feet. Jesus looks like he's asleep and not just dead. I never seen this at the Basilica, only heard about it. The marble is very pretty. How can someone carve rock so perfect? I think it's about the most perfect thing I've ever seen. Tonight I'm going to sit and stare at it while I eat my dinner. I get most of my best ideas when I eat. And some new uncollected stuff that's fairly recently completed. The first one is Maggie Q Like Soup and Stretching. Lucio Fulci, thank you so much. It was driving me insane. Yes, Lucio Fulci. Thank you, Dan. Maggie Q Like Soup and Stretching. Maggie Q Like Soup and Stretching. Is this really news? A report of a recent event decidedly fits the bill. Somewhere someone stretches. Somewhere someone sips soup inasmuch as it's too hot, or perchance they're simply savoring its taste. We could all stand to appreciate the transient pleasures of gastronomical gratification and gastronomical gratification of gumbos, chowders, and bisques. Perfectly delicious rewards for standing calf stretches, lunges with spinal twists, quadriceps, downward facing dog, or anything else singled out from Maggie's daily program, moving us to move us, and please, maybe, like it too. Pineapple? You big brute. Mother tapped your spiny rind like a sculptor or safecracker depending on her mood or impatience and contingent on the workday behind her. She probably fancied pulverizing you on the linoleum, though I don't remember her ever doing that. It might have been therapeutic if messy and a waste of good food. The other day at the Jewel, it was 3 for $12 for plastic containers of pre-cubed chunks. One bite, and I began to cry. I wonder why. And I think I will end with finding Bigfoot. I mean, we all want to find Bigfoot, right? I opened the closet. Not there. The cupboards. Not there either. The refrigerator. Of course, elsewhere. Bigfoot doesn't like the cold, nor enclosed spaces. Their caves are spacious. Thanks so much, Jim. Oh, unmute. Make sure you unmute.
For to great, so I should mention because of the pandemic.
Ooh, you're
books, so I was from this call.
I'm gonna get out of here, Jim. Oh, gunshot, great. Your sound is a little goofy. So let me get out, and that should improve the signal. Yeah. Let me see.
Is that any better? I was wrong. Okay. Yeah, so I got.
Hey Jim, I think this is what we'll do. If it's okay with you, Rachel, are you good to go? We'll switch. We'll have Rachel go, and then maybe you should go out and come back in because you're. Try talking again.
Oh, Larry.
Yeah, your signal's a little wonky, so I think if you go out and come back in, we want to hear the work. So we talked about this in advance. So no problem. I'll send you down. Just go out and come back in, and we'll have Rachel do this. All right, Rachel, are you sure you're good to go?
I'm good to go.
All right. And then we'll make sure that Jim's good when he comes back.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm not going to say too much here because I know we're kind of running short on time. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the beginning of the short story from my collection, How to Walk on Water. And this is the only thing missing was the howling of wolves. How could my sister still coerce me into doing things that could come to no good? She had her 2-year-old grandson, Wendell, in her arms, and he was wearing a baptismal gown. And she was saying, just this once, Harlan, I got it all worked out. No one will ever know except me and you and the good Lord. You won't have to do a darn thing except drive. Lynette had lost her driver's license years ago, and one of her AA friends had dropped her and the kid off at a house in the country. There I was trying to install her borrowed car seat in my pickup so I could take her back home. She was like the wild mint in the garden I couldn't eradicate. It kept coming up, sucking the nourishment from everything I planted. Then she was handing me Wendell, installing that seat as if she were born to such things. We got into the truck and she said, can't you just feel it? Them birds out there and that breeze. That's God, Harlan. That's God on our side. I pulled away as she stuck her head out the window and let her newly dyed hair blow. In the back seat, Wendell laughed, and I had to look away from the rear view. In that lacy gown with his hair slicked to one side, his eyes set too close together, I had to agree with Lynette that his name was a tragedy in the making. She refused to call him Wendell, preferring Scotty Boy instead. How do you like me as a brunette, Harlan? You didn't even say nothing. For once, her face wasn't made up with 3 layers of paint. She wore a blue dress buttoned primly over her tattoos, and I remember her at 17, pregnant and leaving home with nothing but a pillowcase stuffed with clothes. I was 14 then, and now here we were again, both of us, 46 years later, back in our hometown in Wisconsin. We passed a highway patrolman clocking traffic with his car, and she ducked out of sight. God had set the whole thing in motion, she said. Ross's wife had called her in a moment of desperation, needing a sitter. We'd have just enough time to get the kid up to a chapel in the woods for a christening. She had just that morning arranged. If only I would take her. How'd you get the kid, Lynette? The last time we talked, she told me Ross had stopped speaking to her. She sat up and pretended to notice the Watsons' hobby farm. Just last week, they purchased 2 emus. Holy crap, she said. What is that? Is that an ostrich? I stopped in the middle of the road, and she braced her hands on the dashboard and looked behind us. I asked you how you got him. From his daycare. What'd you think, that I kidnapped him? She made her voice high and whiny and mimicked Wendell's daycare teacher. You weren't on our list of approved caretakers. As a matter of fact, you're on our list of people who are not allowed to see Wendell. Me, his own grandmother. How can you believe it? I sacrificed Harlan. I gave Ross up so he could live in that big house and never even think of me. We were just 2 miles from town. I started driving again, slowly, and strained my ears. I thought I heard sirens, and I pulled onto a tractor path that led into a cornfield so I could think. Wendell was strangely quiet, and Lynette noticed me watching him in the rear view. I just gave him a little Benadryl, she said, just to relax him. He won't be any trouble, and we'll have him back in a jiffy. By now, the daycare had called Ross, and Ross had called the cops. Soon someone would put 2 and 2 together, and they'd be looking for me, too. Someday they're going to write about me, Harlan. You could be a part of history, too, part of the Underground Baptism Railroad. They're everywhere, people just like me, only I'll be like the mother of the railroad. You kidnapped him, Lynette. That's a felony. Stupid daycare people. I would have never put Ross or Caleb there. I left them with people I knew. Ross had told me about some of the people Lynette left them with. Biker chicks high on speed, a senile neighbor, men she'd known for a few days. She'd lived on a commune near Nashville. She had helped run a bar out in Wyoming. She had hitchhiked with her kids across the country, losing her youngest in an apartment fire in Eugene, Oregon, while she was out partying, then giving her son Ross to an aunt back home to raise. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're making? I don't need this now, Lynette. She turned in her seat and gave me a hard stare. I ain't doing this for you, Harlan. I'm doing this for Scotty boy. Her voice lowered and she shuddered as she talked about how the world was dying of spiritual decay because of our generation and how it was time for us to stick out our necks and take a stand. She went on and on about birds that fell from the sky and dead fish that washed ashore, how we'd polluted and destroyed everything, all for the love of money. Kids like Scotty are in for a world of hurt, she said, because of us, Harlan. Her mouth wouldn't stop moving. The wind blew the tall and browning corn. A flock of crows rose from the field. The weather, the scenery, everything was just a bit too sharp. I knew it from my time in the service and from my years of trucking. Days like these were specially crafted for the worst kind of trouble. Okay, Jim.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. I think what happened is my earbuds ran out of juice and I took them out and then it was still connected somehow. Okay, so I'm going to finish just one poem. This is from The Human Engine at Dawn, which has a picture of my grandfather over right there on the cover. And this sort of jumps around a little, and I hope you can follow me. Lifetime high. The heaviest thing I ever stole, a 12-pound bowling ball. Strangest thing I ever found on my lawn, a bowling ball I did not steal, swirly green, drilled for tiny fingers. I took it to my office and rolled it across the floor, regaling colleagues with the mystery of its arrival. Regaled in the era of bowling shirt chic, bowling shoes chic, I one-upped them all. I loved its solid thundering thud when dropped on tile. One day I rolled it all the way down the long sloped hallway, and while I can easily find Carnegie Mellon's ranking, 23rd, I cannot find the length of what is said to be Pittsburgh's longest continuous hallway. How can I determine how far my ball traversed before clonking off the wall? Has any bowling ball ever traversed before? I did not hear it clonk, having run screaming from the building that Sunday afternoon. I walked out of Bronco Lanes back in Detroit that Friday night. I could drink a lot and still not stagger, a skinny guy who could hold his liquor, and looking back from the dry state of sobervania, I wish he couldn't. If you look for me back in the 70s and 80s and a rotten rind of the 90s, You'll find me at the table drinking everyone else under it. Why? In that numb, sloshy splash zone, that question was not entertained nor amused. That question was sent out into the dark, somber, non-party night. Last year, I bowled a 189 lifetime high at my nephew Philip's birthday party. Hilarity did not ensue. Defeated, Philip wept into the hand dryer and disgorged his hot dog. I stuck my fingers in a 12-pounder. I threw a light ball. I drank a heavy ball. I danced my bowling alley slip and slide out through Bronco's store and cracked tar parking lot and through the gravel parking lot of Arco Tool and Die, where night shift stood outside on break smoking, guffawing as I lugged my house ball with the giveaway stripe past them, briefly sober and sad. I own the bowling shirt of Big John Sawarski, who died in his 50s, despite his perfect mode head of hair, asbestos lodged in his lungs. My parents bowled in a mixed doubles league with him and Millie. Millie, who takes my blind mother out once a month now, though others abandon her to books on tape and the talking watch tilted back in the living room lazy boy. Oh, I'm about to weep into the hand dryer. Philip, it's no big deal. Did I tell you the one about stealing the bowling ball? Did I tell you about the swirly green one that showed up on my lawn? In the middle of Otis Street, I did my approach and release, though I could not glide on concrete. The ball clunked down the Park Street till it rolled in 8 Mile Road, the main drag of Detroit's border on its long, unmeasured journey, guffaw, to end up on my front lawn 300 miles and years away in Pittsburgh. I wish it was the stupidest thing I ever did. Nobody got killed, but cars were inconvenienced. Maybe somebody even joked, hey, a bowling ball broke through the Bronco corral, guffaw. I had a lot more stupid to do before I ended up in Sobervania, bowling down the longest hallway in the world on a Sunday afternoon in a vacant university building in the bowling shirt of the late Big John Sawarski, passing that ball on to someone somewhere who might need it more. That's it for me.
That's applause for everybody. Yeah. Thank you so much for pivoting that way, Jim, and Rachel for jumping in there. I mean, I was prepared to read more from my work, but I figured that no one wants to hear more of that. So it's better to just kind of switch that around. Were you going to read from Gunshy, Jim?
That New Pornographer's poem was from Gunshy, so I did read from it.
Okay. Now that sounded familiar to me because I have Gunshy. I have a lot from the Daniels Oeuvre, but I don't think I have all 30 of your releases. But yeah, I mean, I put a little note there, shout out for the New Pornographers. So I certainly appreciated that. I mean, once again, both of you were really incredible. Appreciate you doing this, for our first show back and for being so flexible. And when the need arose, do either of you want to plug anything in particular as we wind up and we prepare to have our prayer vigil?
Oh, just books.
Yeah, just books. Yeah. So your most recent, Jim, again is Luck of the Fall.
Luck of the Fall, yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have like a James Daniels website, or do you? Do you have a homepage, Jim?
No, I don't do all the stuff that I should be doing.
People can find you. I know you're on Facebook and yeah. And just looking up even you in the title of the recent book, they would easily find you. So maybe I think that's a good thing that they can easily find you if that's the case. And Rachel, I know you rachelswearingen.com is your main page, right? Yeah. And what's going on? Do you have anything in particular you wanted to plug offhand?
Oh, I'm in the middle of two big books, so I don't know when if ever they'll come out. Hopefully soon, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, short stories, or when you say big, is it not novels?
There are two novels. One that I set aside and I'm going back to, and then one that's in about second draft phase. So yeah,
Wow.
we'll see what happens there. And that story that I just read is online at Sand Online. So I got to go to Berlin and as a prize for that story for 3 weeks
Wow.
last year. So check out Reader Berlin and their prize. I think their contest is, if I remember right, I think the deadline's in October. It's a great one if you want to get 3 weeks away somewhere to write. So
Well, that's great. When were you there? When were you there? What time of year?
Balmy
I've never been, so I'd like it.
balmy January. So yeah, that's the only bad part about it. But
Well,
it's even more Berlin in January. So
plenty of incentive to be writing, I think, right? To be inside and writing when you're there. Well, that's great. I mean, once again, I mean, it's, I do like a musical iteration of this, but this is like feels like a new thing to me. So I'm just getting my bearings, but I so appreciate you both being here for the first show. I love your writing. And let's do this again at some point down the line. This may become an in-person event again. So Jim, you're going to have to like start driving now, I guess, or walking if that's your preference. Start walking now. But who knows? But I would love to have you back, and I always love reading your work. But it means a lot more, and I think it. I mean, for me, but to actually hear it from the writer too. So you both did a great job.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Larry and Rachel. Great.
Thank you. This was really fun.
So I think what I will do, since we're all probably chomping at the bit to like get back to whatever we are going on in our corners of the world, we can say our official goodbye, and then you two just kind of hang on after we go off the air. And so this is a quarterly series, and I think December 6th is the next date. I think it's kind of like the first Wednesday is how I've worked it out. I think it's first Wednesday. That might be the second Wednesday. Is this the second Wednesday? It doesn't matter. It's going to be early in December. And hopefully that'll be the pattern, and then, quarterly on that Wednesday. So thanks again to Jim Daniels, Rachel Swearingen. I've been your host, Larry O'Dean, and we'll see you in December. And guys, hang tight, and everyone have a good night. And thanks for tuning in.